FIFA has just made a decision that could change everything for Argentina. And what was revealed behind the scenes could make this World Cup controversy even bigger. But before we reveal what happened, hit like and subscribe right now, because you don't want to miss what comes next. Now, here's what FIFA has decided, and why Argentina's complaint could be far from over. The World Cup final was supposed to be the final chapter. One match, one trophy, one champion. But instead, the controversy surrounding Argentina and Spain has continued long after the final whistle. According to the claims surrounding Argentina's complaint, the Argentine side has challenged certain circumstances connected to the final, particularly decisions involving the officiating and the treatment of players during the match. And now, the focus has shifted toward FIFA. The question is no longer simply whether Argentina was unhappy with the result. The bigger question is whether the circumstances surrounding the match are serious enough to justify a formal investigation. And that is where this entire story becomes extremely interesting, because there is a massive difference between saying that a referee made a mistake and proving that a match was deliberately manipulated. Football has always had controversial refereeing decisions. Penalties, red cards, VAR decisions, offside calls, handballs, fouls. Moments that completely change the direction of a match. Every generation has its own controversial football moments, but a mistake is not automatically evidence of corruption. And that distinction is absolutely critical here. If Argentina wants this complaint to move forward, the strongest argument would not simply be that the referee made questionable decisions. The strongest argument would require actual evidence showing that something improper happened behind those decisions. That is why the next phase could be so important. And now we come to one of the most talked about details in this controversy. According to the claims circulating around the dispute, the referee who officiated the final announced his retirement shortly after the match. That immediately created questions among supporters. Why retire after such a massive game? Was the decision already planned? Was it simply the normal end of a refereeing career? Or could the timing eventually become relevant if an investigation takes place? Now, we need to be very careful here. A referee retiring after a major tournament does not prove corruption. It does not prove that a match was manipulated. And it does not prove that anyone attempted to influence the result. The timing alone cannot establish wrongdoing. But from the perspective of those demanding an investigation, the timing is being presented as another reason why the circumstances surrounding the final deserve closer examination. And that leads us to the question everyone is asking. What if investigators actually discover something? What if documents, communications, referee reports, or other evidence reveal that major decisions were influenced improperly? What happens then? Would FIFA simply ignore it? Would the result remain untouched? Could the match be replayed? Could the trophy ever be reassigned? Or would the dispute move into a completely different legal process? These are the questions that make this controversy so fascinating. And there is one institution that could become extremely important if the dispute continues. The Court of Arbitration for Sport, commonly known as CAS. In Spanish-speaking football discussions, it is often referred to as TAS. CAS handles sports-related legal disputes, and if a case progresses through the appropriate procedures, arbitration can become part of the process. But there is another important point that needs to be understood. A case reaching CAS does not automatically mean Argentina wins. It does not automatically mean Spain loses. And it certainly does not automatically mean the World Cup final will be replayed. It simply means the dispute could potentially move into another legal stage. That distinction is incredibly important. Now let's go back to the beginning. Why would Argentina challenge the final in the first place? The complaint, as described in the controversy, is not simply about one isolated referee decision. The argument is that several circumstances surrounding the match deserve examination. That could include disciplinary decisions, the use of VAR, the interpretation of certain incidents, the consistency of the officiating, and whether the rules were applied correctly. But again, those questions alone do not prove manipulation. They only establish the basis for asking whether an investigation is justified. And that is where the entire situation could go in several different directions. Was it simply human error? Was it a controversial interpretation? Was the referee simply wrong? Or was there something deliberate behind the decisions? Those are completely different allegations, and proving the most serious one would require much more than angry reactions from fans or viral posts on social media. It would require evidence. It would require documentation. It would require a legitimate investigation. And that is why FIFA's response matters so much. If FIFA determines that there is no sufficient basis for further action, then the complaint could eventually lose momentum. But if FIFA determines that legitimate questions exist and that more information is needed, then the controversy could become much more serious. And now we reach one of the biggest questions of all. What could happen to the World Cup? There are several possible scenarios, but some are far more realistic than others. The first scenario is the one Argentina supporters would probably love the most. Argentina could potentially seek recognition as the legitimate champion if an official process ever established that the final result was fundamentally compromised. But there is a huge difference between requesting that outcome and FIFA actually awarding Argentina the trophy. That would be an extraordinary decision. It would require an extraordinary legal and sporting justification. A World Cup title cannot simply be transferred because millions of supporters believe the final was unfair. There would need to be a clear basis in the rules and overwhelming evidence supporting such a decision. The second possibility is a replay of the final. And this would be even more extraordinary. Football authorities almost never want to replay a World Cup final. Think about what that would mean. The entire result of the tournament would suddenly be questioned. The official records could be affected. Player legacies could be affected. Sponsors could be affected. The historical meaning of the tournament could be affected. And that is exactly why evidence would have to be extremely powerful before anyone could seriously consider such a decision. Then there is a third possibility, and this may be much more realistic. The investigation could continue without immediately changing the result. Documents could be reviewed. Officials could be questioned. Match footage could be analyzed. Referee reports could be examined. VAR procedures could be investigated. And the complaint could move through additional disciplinary or legal channels. In that scenario, the controversy continues, but Spain remains the recognized champion unless an official authority eventually decides otherwise. And then there is the fourth possibility. FIFA could reject the complaint completely. If that happens, Argentina's challenge would not produce the outcome its supporters are hoping for. The final result would remain in place, Spain would continue to be recognized as champion, and the controversy would mostly continue as a debate among supporters, analysts, and football commentators. So when you see someone saying that Argentina is already guaranteed to become world champion because of this complaint, be careful. That conclusion goes much further than what can currently be established. But there is another reason this story is attracting so much attention. The politics and reputation of international football. FIFA is not dealing with two supporters arguing online. This is about a World Cup final, the biggest stage in international football. Every major decision connected to a final receives enormous attention, and every authority involved understands that any ruling could become historic. If FIFA rejects the complaint, Argentine supporters could argue that their concerns were ignored. If FIFA investigates further, Spanish supporters could argue that their World Cup victory is being unfairly questioned. And if an investigation ever uncovers serious wrongdoing, then the consequences could go far beyond Argentina and Spain. Could raise questions about referee appointments, VAR procedures, tournament governance, transparency, accountability, and the credibility of future World Cups. That is why this issue needs to be handled carefully, because there is a massive difference between controversy and corruption. A controversial decision can happen in a few seconds. Proving deliberate manipulation can take months or even years. And this is exactly why the retirement issue is attracting attention. Supporters are looking at the timing and asking questions. But investigators would have to ask something much more important. Was the retirement actually connected to the controversy? Or was it already planned long before the final? If the retirement had been planned before the match, then the timing could simply be a coincidence. If it was a normal career decision, then there may be nothing suspicious about it at all. But if evidence ever showed that the retirement was connected to an attempt to avoid scrutiny, then investigators would have something concrete to examine. That is the difference between speculation and evidence. And that is why the next official steps matter so much. Argentina would need to support its allegations with documentation. FIFA would need to evaluate the complaint. Relevant authorities would need to determine whether the evidence justified further action. And if the matter progresses, the legal process could become much longer and more complicated. Only after that could anyone seriously discuss extraordinary remedies. Now imagine the pressure on everyone involved. Argentina has one of the most passionate football fan bases in the world. Spain has an enormous football audience of its own. The World Cup is watched across the planet. And every person involved understands that a major decision could become part of football history. If FIFA rejects the complaint, Argentina supporters may feel that justice was denied. If FIFA investigates, Spain supporters may feel that their team's achievement is being attacked. And if an investigation somehow discovers serious wrongdoing, then the entire football world would be forced to confront a much bigger question. Can the result of a World Cup final ever be challenged after the trophy has already been awarded? That is the real issue hiding underneath this entire controversy. It is not simply Argentina versus Spain. It is not simply Messi versus the referee. It is not simply one controversial decision. It is a question about sporting authority, evidence, accountability, and the legitimacy of the biggest match in international football. Now, here is something many people are missing. Even if Argentina has a legitimate complaint, winning the complaint is not the same thing as automatically becoming world champion. There are multiple stages between those two things. First, the complaint has to be considered. Then authorities must determine whether there is enough substance to investigate. Evidence must be examined. Regulations must be applied. Officials may need to provide information. And only after all of that could an extraordinary remedy even be considered. So anyone promising that Argentina will definitely receive the World Cup should be extremely cautious. The responsible position is much simpler. If credible evidence exists, it should be examined through the proper channels. If the evidence does not establish wrongdoing, then the original result is likely to remain unchanged. But the fact that this controversy continues to attract attention tells us something very important. People are not only asking who won, they are asking whether the final was fair. And that may ultimately become the central issue. Was the result simply the product of football's unpredictable nature? Were controversial decisions simply part of the game? Or were there circumstances that genuinely deserve deeper investigation? Those are the questions the relevant authorities would ultimately need to answer. And now we arrive at the biggest question of all. What happens next? The next major development would be any official communication regarding Argentina's complaint. If FIFA announces that the matter is closed, the controversy could begin moving toward an ending. If FIFA requests additional documentation, the dispute could continue. If the matter progresses toward arbitration, the timeline could become significantly longer. And if genuinely new evidence appears, everything could change again. But until an official ruling says otherwise, Spain's title cannot simply be erased because of a controversial allegation. That is the reality. And it is exactly why the next official announcement could be so important. For Argentina, this is no longer simply about one referee decision. It is about whether the authorities will seriously examine the complaint. For Spain, it is about defending the legitimacy of its World Cup triumph. For FIFA, it is about protecting the credibility of its biggest tournament. And for football fans around the world, it comes down to one simple question. Was justice actually served? Or are we watching the beginning of a controversy that could continue for months? Because if credible new evidence ever emerges, this story could become much bigger than anyone expected. And if the complaint reaches another level, the football world could be forced to revisit one of the most controversial finals in recent memory. But remember one thing. A claim is not proof. A suspicious timeline is not proof. A controversial referee decision is not proof. Only verified evidence and an official investigation can establish what actually happened. And that is exactly what makes the next step so important. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Argentina deserves a deeper investigation into the World Cup final? Do you think the referee's retirement timing is meaningful? Or could it simply be a coincidence? Should FIFA review the officiating decisions again? And most importantly, if an investigation ever proved serious wrongdoing, what should happen? Should Argentina be declared champion? Should the final be replayed? Or should the original result remain untouched? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want to stay updated on every major development surrounding Argentina, Spain, FIFA, and this controversial World Cup dispute, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this story may not be over yet, and the next official decision could change everything. Until then, keep your eyes on the facts, watch for official announcements, and remember, in football, the final whistle does not always end the controversy. Sometimes it is where the real story begins.